In the late 1570s, the world as a whole really evolved as more and more explorers were circumnavigating across the globe for their various reasons. Drake, wait, not that type of Drake. Sir Francis Drake was a revolutionary explorer of the time, with his main accomplishments being the first Englishman explorer to travel across the world in a vessel. He was also the second person ever to do so, following just short of Juan Sebastian, a fellow explorer from Portugal. Interestingly, both these explorers used Magellan's findings to better improve their voyage path and to ensure greater survival. But let's backtrack, take a look at it, and travel back into the Elizabethan ages to truly see what Drake was capable of. Francis Drake was born sometime in the 1540s, the date is unknown, in Devonshire, England. His father was actually a fugitive that fled the country in 1548 for his acts of robbery, which was not exactly proven to have any effects on Drake as a whole. Voyages really piqued his interest from the start, however, since as soon as Francis turned 18, he enlisted in the Hawkins family fleet. This fleet primarily consisted of plundering or seizing valuables off the French coast to serve the country of England. Later on in 1560, he switched his expertise to the slave trade by being one of the very first pioneers in that field, which 8 years later, in 1568, the Hawkins family gained interest and put him in charge of the whole ship to do these tasks. These tasks of illicit slave trading happened near the Spanish colonies, which is part of the reason for his main voyage. Francis was slated to travel across the whole globe in just 3 years' time, but there are many specifics to this that should be stated. In 1577, Sir Francis Drake was tasked with the leader of a voyage to go beyond the Strait of Magellan and map the coast beyond into the unknown. The secondary task of this expedition would be to cause as much damage to the Spaniards as physically possible, as this was approved by the Queen, and she stated, "Would gladly be revenged on the King of Spain for divers injuries that I have received." Drake's idea, however, was to turn the entire voyage into a piracy mission, which was not exactly approved by the Queen, but with a vessel of over 100 people. On the main vessel, there were different smaller ships, and in a 100-ton ship, the sky was the limit for Drake. He approached the Brazilian coast in 1578, and there, the officers of Drake's boat, or the Golden Hind as he would like to call it, were deemed to be unreliable and were untrustworthy by Francis, and therefore executed and beheaded them. On August 21st, 1578, he had entered the Strait of Magellan, which then 16 days later arrived in the Pacific Ocean. Shortly after, he spotted a Spanish merchantman's ship, and of course, seized control of the area and took all of their valuables. Nothing much happened for a while. With the occasional robbery of ships, it was essentially just a mapping of the South American coast and partially the North American counterpart. But in July 1579, he then spotted islands near the Philippines and then charted through the Indian Ocean, whilst also acquiring spices to introduce back to England. After the 3-year-long journey, he last docked his ship on September 26, 1580 at Plymouth Harbor, where only 56 out of the original 100 made it back alive. Directly, however, Queen Elizabeth herself went inside the ship and declared knighthood to Sir Francis Drake for all of his hard work, findings, and most importantly, treasures. Interestingly, however, Drake did not keep an inventory of all of his treasures from the expedition and onward, so that he would not be taxed on his hard-earned findings. In his last years, Drake had spent the time taking more and more from the Spanish, as he was a conquistador at heart. He was one of the primary challenges of the Spanish Armada, as his nickname among the Spanish people were the El Drake, or translated, the Dragon. He met his overall demise on an expedition to the West Indies in 1596, where the Spaniards seized him on his first ever failed mission. He was buried near the coastline of Portobello, Panama. In all, Sir Francis Drake was not exactly a good person at heart, but he was a master at his craft. To give credit where credit is due, he was one of the first to make a more accurate mapping of the world, and it was the one that showed Spain rebellious actions, as no other nation was doing this at the time. He'll forever be remembered in our history, debatable if it was for the right or wrong reasons. Thanks for watching.